Hi, HCA period 2, Miss Vaughn here. I'm going to talk to you about what you're going to be doing today. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And y'all should be in your assigned seats. And as an overview for today, y'all are going to be working on your essay. Okay, so your agenda for today, hopefully before this video starts, you have your exam passed back to you. So if Dulce or Leslie can take a moment to pass back the exams that are left on my desk, that would be fantastic. I want to go over your scores because, as you all know, this has been a very heavy week for me, and I wasn't able to leave you comments on your assignment, but I wanted to talk about what these scores mean by walking you through that today. I also want to give you some reminders for the essay, and then also just give you time to begin writing and get clarification, and also maybe write emails to me for the clarification that you need. So looking ahead, the homework is that you're going to have your intro and one body paragraph typed in a Google document for Tuesday's class. Then on Wednesday, you guys are going to have a complete draft of your essay done that you're going to bring to class then. So Tuesday is going to be another work day for your essay. And then on Wednesday, that full rough draft is due. And then on Sunday, October 30th at 11:59 p.m., the final draft of your essay is going to be due. Okay, so if you're looking at your exams, if you have it out in front of you, there's going to be 4 numbers in a row. The first number is assessing your knowledge and understanding. So if you have an old IB rubric laying around in your binder, you can look at the descriptions, but I'm just going to talk you through what those scores mean. So as a reminder, if you got a 4, you're not perfect. You just did what the rubric asked you to do. If you got a 3, there's some things that you were probably missing that caused you to earn a 3 instead of a 4. So you might have been missing context. So being able to place the passage of like what was happening before and what happens after shows your knowledge and understanding of not only the passage itself, but also the text as a whole. So it's really important for you to set that context. Same thing for the specific pieces of evidence. So the evidence that you choose also needs to be contextualized. So you can't just you should not just drop in a description of like, in one frame, this happens. It should be like Margie reacts to this character and Satrapi then draws a frame that shows or says or whatever it is. The second reason for why you might have earned a 3 instead of a 4 is that you're missing authorial purpose. So you're able to talk about Margie, the character, but then you stop at that. And you need to start extending it to also talking about Satrapi as the writer. Like she makes specific decisions in including very specific parts of her life in this telling to us, the reader. And you need to do that intellectual hard work to give an explanation for why you think that is. And more specifically, the reason is going to be that she wants to bring out a global issue for a specific purpose. So you need to get to there. Some of you also just like moved evidence along, like you summarized the passage as a whole, and then you sprinkled some evidence throughout to show that you like understood the significant moments, but there was no analysis of how it brought out a global issue or what the authorial purpose was. So you earned a 3 instead of a 4. If you got a 2, you probably did not frame the passage at all. You might have just claimed that there was a global issue, but then you didn't explain what the global issue was in context with the book. Like global issues are usually something that's pretty repetitive that happens throughout the book. So being able to add on or explain or like understand like that this instance, whatever your evidence is, comes after many other instances before, and you being able to explain or describe or like summarize briefly what those instances before were is really helpful. Okay, for criterion B, analysis and evaluation, that's the second number in the series of 4. So if you got a 3, you probably didn't talk about any sort of language analysis or like strategies that Satrapi uses. So you can analyze the words on the page, but you can also analyze how she draws the frame. And if you didn't do that, if you just like summarize like what's happening within the evidence that you chose, you probably got a 3 or a 2. If you didn't write about authorial purpose at all, you probably got a 3. If you just wrote about Margie, what it means for Margie, and you ended at that, then you got a 3. And then if you did not explain how it addresses the global issue, you got a 3. If you got a 2, you probably missed analysis of the passage and it was mostly summary. And this is all like analysis and evaluation. So if you just like summarized what was happening in the passage and you didn't use any evidence, then you probably got a 2. Okay, the second 2 numbers is or are organization and development for that 3rd number, and then language for the 4th. So organization and development, that number is usually based on how well you do the first 2 numbers. So organization is like how you organize your ideas. Do they make sense as you write about them? And then development is, do you fully develop the idea that you set out to prove with your writing? So if you did not explain enough in terms of authorial choices and then also authorial purpose, then you probably did not do well in your development score. For language, if you mentioned absolutely no devices or graphic novel features, then you probably received a 2. If you received a 3, there are probably some parts that were a little confusing or kind of casual, or you wrote in the second person where you were moving beyond like an analysis of Margie and Satrapi as an author, and you were saying things that were like, they sounded kind of preachy to me, like things like, this shows that you shouldn't smoke cigarettes to cope with your issues. And that's not analyzing the text, that's telling me what I should do or shouldn't do with my life, which is good advice, but not analysis of the text. Okay, this is an example of really nice analysis. I took this from one of the exams. The author of this analysis, they wrote about existentialism, and they wanted to explain how in the end of Margie's time in Austria, she really shows that she was unable to deal with all the freedom that was granted to her when she went to Austria, and that the consequence of that was that she lived in bad faith, or that she made decisions that were not authentic to who she was as a person. Okay, this slideshow is on Canvas for you to look at, but one thing that I want to point out to you is that in the beginning, if you look at the way that she describes this passage, she talks about how the bottom frame depicts Margie holding a cigarette, contemplating the advice her doctor gives her about the danger of cigarettes. Okay, so that's describing what's happening. It's giving context for when the frame happens. And then she goes on. She states, I think that I prefer to put myself in serious danger rather than to confront my shame at not having become someone. Okay, so then she ends the quote there. Then here's where the analysis comes into play. She names a literary feature when she says the symbolism of Margie holding the cigarette. So she talks about what's happening in the frame with the message, that's the text that she just quoted, seeks to convey the cigarette as an example of one of the ways that Margie hides from her shame. Yet it places her in danger, unable to confront the overwhelming amount of freedom she is given. So then it extends that analysis to like bigger picture ideas of Margie holding the cigarette, unable to handle her freedom. Okay, how do we know she's unable to handle her freedom? Well, she's had a really difficult time in Austria up until this point. So that's where the writer of this sample brings in her knowledge of what's happened in other parts of the book to inform how she analyzes this page. Margie's statement in the frame conveys to the reader Satrapi's shift from no freedom to freedom. Okay, so then we get into a little bit of authorial purpose. Like Satrapi's trying to show us the shift that happens within Margie, where she went from no freedom to freedom. And then she continues with the rest of her analysis, explaining like why this is so important, because in Iran, she thought that she didn't have any freedom and that's all she wanted. But then when she goes to Austria, she can't handle her freedom. And like, that's where like the big juicy, like bigger picture global issue analysis comes into play. So if you're questioning yourself and you're saying, okay, in freshman and sophomore year, we were told that we write 2 sentences of analysis and then we move on. You're going to need to write a little bit more analysis now that you are a junior in high school. So In this slide, I have a series of steps for how you can write really good analysis. Part of that is choosing really good evidence, and then also not treating your writing of analysis as like something that you just need to get done and move on, but something where you're really like explaining your thinking and your understanding of like how you know something is true by the evidence that is in front of you. So I want to point your attention to steps 4 through 7 more specifically. After you give your evidence, you're going to explain the language and or the devices that are used in the evidence. Like the writer in the previous sample, she said that there was symbolism and that there was this notion of shame. Also talk about the effect on the reader, not just the emotional effect on you as you read it, but also how like the effect on you and how your understanding of this global issue in Margie's life is building and what Satrapi wants to demonstrate. Also explain how it builds on our previous knowledge. And then know that you don't always have to do your analysis in that order. Like you should definitely analyze the language right after you state the quote, or analyze the features right after you describe the frame. But the way that you explain it, the global issue, like you need to kind of work with writing and like get stuff down on paper or in your document to figure out like what's going to sound best that is convincing for my argument. Okay, in the slideshow also, I have some ideas here for you to build your introduction. There's a couple of clarifying things that I want to say here. And one is that you need to talk about some of the cultural context of Iran and or Austria in order for the reader to like fully be able to understand what happens to Margie. Like some of you are going to have to talk about the theocracy. Some of you are going to have to talk about the government, how it's constructed, how it came to be. So you put that in your introduction, because your introduction of your essay is an intro to all of the ideas that you're going to develop later on in the course of your essay. I always like to draft my thesis in a really like short, vague way, write my body paragraphs, and then go back and correct the thesis. Y'all need to figure out what works best for you. Okay, here are some more tips for the essays, in that I think it's okay for you to focus on one part of Margie's life in the book. So if you want to focus on her time in Austria, that's fine. If you want to focus on her return from Austria or return to Iran from Austria, that's fine. If you want to focus on her childhood, that's fine. If you want to focus on her school age years during the war, that's fine. But you need to bring your understanding of other parts of Margie's life, specifically what happens like before that part of her life, into your analysis. And that does not have to be built into the intro. Like you're not going to tell us Margie's whole life story. You're going to focus on a summary of how your global issue shows up over the course of whatever it is that you're focusing on. And if you need help, be sure to ask for it, because that's what I'm here for. So if you're like, I forgot when this happens, you can go back through your notes and you can reread them to refresh in your head where you need to go and find evidence, or you can ask me. Okay, that is it for today. Use your time wisely. The slideshow is on Canvas for you to look at too. And I hope that you have a very productive, focused outlining session, and that remember that it's really hard for me to give you feedback if you don't have anything produced. Like I am not going to give you the topic in which you're going to write about, or I'm not going to give you like what you should focus on or what page numbers you should use. Like that's going to be a decision that you need to make on your own. Last reminder is that any writing that you have previously done, you can reuse those paragraphs as one of your paragraphs for your global issue that you cover in your essay. That's about it. No cell phones. In order to use a Chromebook, you have to be able to show your very completed outline to the sub. Then you can get a Chromebook out, get started writing your intro and body paragraph. Sub has the ability to take your cell phone and put it in the pocket if you have it out and it is distracting for you. But I also know that y'all know that you work better when you don't have that distraction around. Again, email me if you have any questions, and I will see you on Tuesday, and I hope you have